I had to come to the conclusion, and again, back to like I go to my faith a lot for things, right? I had a question for God, and I was like, hold up, like, why is it that I have to be the bigger person all the time with my parents? Why? They're the adult. Or I'm an adult now too, but they've been here longer. They should get it. Blah blah. And while I was asking these questions, it just hit me. I gave you the ability, Patrick,
Exactly.
to let things go. I gave you the ability to forgive.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they haven't gotten there yet. But
Mm-hmm.
since I gave it to you, guess what that means? Since you know better now,
You
Patrick,
gotta
it
use
means
it.
you may have to display it to them first.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
And that
Mm-hmm.
may be the thing that helps shift them into that understanding, the mercy and the grace from their own child. And I was like, oh my goodness. So
Absolutely. Yeah.
my mom and I relationship, and she's my big now, my boss, right? Or I don't say boss, she's broker in charge, but uh the the dynamic, there was a feeling of almost something evil that was trying to come between me and my mom's relationship from my childhood, from a child up. When I was a baby, like elementary school age, yeah, she was mother, but then something shifted, okay, where it was like me and my mom were at war all the time.
Look, hell of an intro. I tell you what you info, but I never really been the type of dude to give no info.
Welcome to the Walk and Grill Show, everyone. It's Ronnie and Courtney on the mic, and we have, if you're watching at least on the YouTube version, we have a special guest with us today. And today is going to be a little bit different from what we typically do. Most times we'll hear a little bit more about Patrick, who was our guest here, and kind of what's his story. But we're gonna throw the dices on this one, and we're gonna go into a topic specific because I think he has a lot to share on this one. But personally, I met Patrick at a networking event, and from there we just kind of bonded really well. And it's a great guy. I don't have nothing bad to say just quite yet about him, but not that that time will come. We don't wish upon that, but it's it's definitely something that he's a great guy. I guess I want you guys to really hear what he has to say and hear his story because it is remarkable. And not a lot of individuals are put in these positions, and if they do, it's the responsibility aspect of it that kind of breaks people apart. As kind of what I see. And so, with that being said, did I miss out anything that Patrick you want to share upon and just make the people aware or know of you?
No, man, I single parent, full time dad, working on launching a career simultaneously while moving my way away from the 9 to 5 life at the same time, which is very, very interesting. But yeah, so I guess we can get into the details, other things that dynamics of my
Yeah.
situation as we talk. But
Yeah, no, definitely.
that's
You
good.
you missed out on it. I missed out on it. We met at a networking event. You didn't say it, but that shirt, your shirt that you have on right there, that's the career that you're launching. I'm assuming real estate.
Correct, correct. It's a family dynamic to it. My mom she started real estate when I was in high school. I always had in the back of my head that maybe one day I would get into it, but I wanted to try everything else before the. Uh, but now my situation actually kind of helped bring me to the threshold of this real estate stuff because it was just time to make a bigger
Yeah.
move in life. So here
Did
I
you
am.
now? How was that conversation when things went full circle for you? It sounded like it was always there. Real estate was always there for you, but you're like, I'm gonna go my own route, and then it comes back full circle. So, what was it? Not to now, you don't have to share no details, but I'm just curious to
Oh
know what was
no,
that conversation like when when the world goes in 360 for you.
I'll say this. I had my son when I was 22
Okay.
years old. Okay, you can kind of piece together how my I was still a baby myself. I We did a decent job. I say decent. Uh, uh, Making sure that when we had him, we did what we were supposed to do. But I didn't have him every weekend or every week at that time. It was every other week, and sometimes some co-parenting thrown in there for a while. But my mindset was a 22-year-old's mindset at that time. So trying to be a father, survive, make sure I'm taking care of myself and my son, and then everything else that just some things I brought upon myself during that time frame, but it all shaped and formed me to where I'm at today. So I always tell folks if I can go back and do it all over again, there are some things I would do differently, but as it stands now, I'm not really. I'm just happy to be alive still, to be honest with you, because it shaped me to who I am, and it gave me kind of like the resilience to press forward. So
I was just gonna say, just based on literally what you just said, was I think that's the hard part is what is and what isn't important. Especially like you said, you were 22. So what's important to a 22-year-old? And of course your son, of course of course your kids are gonna come up, but you might have done what you thought was important at the time. And now we look back and we're like, okay, we did not prioritize very well, right? Hindsight,
Yeah.
especially in terms of priorities, hindsight is like, whew, that was not priority at the time and you made it priority. But being able to work through that, yeah. So I think that's part of it is like you answered the question, but the question still exists, for a lot of people. And I'm sure currently we're doing things like that as well, right? Where it's like, yeah, we're doing well in terms of priorities, and then maybe like our 40s and 50s are like, ooh, those are not priorities.
Yes, and my son is now 10, going on 11, and even recently, that what you just mentioned, people always say kids paying attention. They're always, kids are paying attention even when you think they're not paying attention. Well, that's really coming to light now at uh at 10, going on 11, and the dynamics of my our relationship is shifting. Even recently, I'm just like fairly recently, things happen that are kind of like, all right, we're not in the same space anymore. He's moving from elementary, literally he's in 5th grade now, going on to middle school, and um, it's a shift happening. And me as a parent, I have to remember back what that was like for me
Mm-hmm.
at that age before I respond or react. You gotta put yourself in their shoes, because I have a perspective that he doesn't have. I've been where he's at. He hasn't been where I'm at. So it has a little bit more responsibility on me to keep that in mind when addressing things or talking to him about things, so that I don't react and not show some sort of empathy towards whatever he may be going through.
Mm-hmm.
And the dynamic of his situation is different from my situation still
Yeah.
too. I grew up with both parents in the house. They're not together anymore. That adds some more details to that 22-year-old stage. The same time I was having my son was the same time my parents were divorcing. Okay, all that was going on at the same time. Um, but I did grow up. I got out of the house with both parents in the house together. For him, it's not like that, and I mean, I can imagine. There was a few. I'll tell you what. I what's hard for me. Um, but I have to get over it. I asked my son one time a very straight up question, and I hadn't really asked him. I think the reason I didn't ask because I was afraid of the response. But I asked him how he felt about the amount of time spent with mom versus dad and how that was affecting him.
That's a
The conversation
that's a
ended in
tough
tears
question
for
for
both of us.
for a kid. No.
I mean, look, if
Mm-mm.
you don't ask the tough
Mm.
questions, they'll keep them
No,
inside,
you
and
got it.
they'll find other ways of dealing with it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's my job as a parent. I mean, to have that conversation, and I can ask. He doesn't have to respond. I'm not gonna make him tell me
Mm-hmm.
anything, but I have to at least give him the space to communicate it if it's something he needs to get out. Because if he doesn't get it
Mm-hmm.
out with me, he's gonna let it out somewhere.
Yeah.
What in the world is happening?
Beautiful.
I got thumbs up. Okay.
That was
I got.
great. That was a great point you just made.
Oh man, I think that's the
That's
new
awesome.
Apple feature. I did
Yeah.
see that before, but on FaceTime, I didn't see it on this.
Oh.
I think if you go like this
Yeah,
too,
see,
it'll do
see.
something like a. Oh, there he goes. Yeah.
If you're
That's
Look, we're making magic
amazing.
already, man. Look at this.
That's
only if
so
you're on
funny.
YouTube, you will understand.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Wow, that's exciting. No, I was just gonna say, Ronnie, just referring to what you said, I think just as adults in general, we don't give kids enough credit for what they're already experiencing, what they're already thinking about. So the question, like in terms of the way you pose it, yeah, it might be difficult, and that would be a difficult question for anybody, but he's already thinking about it. He might not be thinking about it in that way that you asked it, but he's experiencing it. So anything that they're experiencing, they're somewhat, processing it on their own. So just the ability to open up that conversation is huge.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
I think in terms of like what questions are difficult for kids, a lot of times it's just the language that we use. As long as
Yeah.
we can break it down, the conversation can be had.
Yeah.
But
I agree. I
Yeah.
agree. I'm glad I'll be honest with you. Since that time I asked, which wasn't too long ago, probably like a year ago, I asked him that. Uh, it's actually I don't think we've touched too much on that since. I plan on following up with them, but after that not, I want to say incident, it wasn't an incident, but after that conversation, it was deep. And I'm 2 years ago, I had my first experience with therapy. I had avoided therapy my entire life. A part of the dynamics of how I grew up, therapy was something that was not necessarily like. I'll tell you this. I'm really big on my faith, and I grew up in a faith-based home, right? But here's the deal: therapy helped me, and in some cases, um, I think sometimes folks will take their beliefs and they'll say, you know what, the answers are all here, which may be true, but that doesn't mean that someone can't help you uh, uh, iron some things out. A professional can't help you iron some things out because people always ask me, and especially the individual who was really big on not needing the therapy. Now that I talk to that individual, when it comes up, I let that individual finish speaking, and I go, "No, therapy helped me. I still believe, I still have faith, but hey, but therapy helped." And I stand on that because it was a big shift. Matter of fact, I decided to go get pursue my real estate license after a therapy session I had with my therapist. We didn't necessarily share the same beliefs, but she was very supportive, and she made me watch. I have a little plug here for Netflix. We're not getting paid for this, but I'll say it anyway. Uh, there's a Netflix series that I recommend that if anyone has time to go watch it. It's almost like a TED Talk, but it's by Brene Brown. You may know who she is. Okay,
I
okay.
was like, you need all these thumbs up in the back now. Like,
Yeah.
FaceTime should be catching all these things now.
Yeah,
But
yeah. It's called The Call to Courage,
yes.
and she had me watch it when I first looked it up during the session. I'm curious. I googled it. I was like, man, who is this? But she got me watching this.
Mhm.
I'll do it. She gave me homework, and again, I went and watched it. And by the end of that, I had probably went through every emotion in the book.
Mhm.
And after watching the series, I was like, you know what? The next day, I went and took that leap and said, I'm signing up for the classes. Wherever I got my savings, I'm just gonna throw it all at getting this classes started and just see what happens. And I hadn't been in the classroom environment since like some college that I tried to get done while I was having my kid on the way and all that stuff. But ultimately, I had to stop the college experience because I was paying my way through school. My parents, were not financially blessed at the time, so I had to figure out myself how to manage that. And it became too much. I said either school or work and supporting my child. So I dropped the school to support him, and I just started working. Uh, I left. I didn't give up on school, but I just knew at the time there was nothing. I didn't have any other support coming from anywhere else, and I wasn't gonna have my son living, in the car or anything with me. So I
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
decided to work, and I think there was a part of me that. Uh, anyway, I won't get too far off on that. Back to Brene Brown. I listened to the
Okay.
listened to her I guess it's her talk,
Yeah.
and it really did make a big difference.
Mhm.
And one of the things that stood out to me was she said, um, you have to basically, well, courage is like not doing something, or bravery is not doing something without fear.
Mhm.
Is doing it with the fear present
Exactly.
still.
Yep.
Then she made another point of like how outside folks, she had went through her own experience where her husband had told her not to go check, the comments on after one of the,
Mhm.
you know, web, experiences she had. She said, don't go checking the comments and stuff. Just listen to me and just like take a break off the internet today. And so as soon as he left the house, he went around the internet and started reading all these negative comments about her appearance and all blah, blah, blah. And, but she said that the folks making those comments were outside of the arena that she was in. You know,
Absolutely.
they're not within it themselves, so their opinions really doesn't matter about
Mhm.
her situation.
Mhm.
And that kind of gave me that, yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Why would I be worried about what other people think? They aren't even making the attempt to do what I'm trying to do. And so
Absolutely.
it helped me kind of press forward and get what I need to get done for myself and my son. Yeah.
Absolutely. I love that you brought her up. Um, just a little, obviously, this is not the point of the episode, but just to kind of reiterate. First of all, Brene Brown we're going to continue to plug her a little bit.
Okay.
Just for listeners, her whole thing is vulnerability, courage, pushing through things like that, like you mentioned, but vulnerability is the forefront. The reason I kind of reacted when you said a book of emotions is because I'm not sure if you know, but she literally has a book of emotions. It's called Atlas of the Heart by Brene Brown. I read it. As Ronnie would point out, I'm sure if he was here, I'm not a reader. So if I've completed books,
Uh,
they're fantastic.
okay.
Reggie's being one of them, as everybody knows, and basically anything by Brene Brown. So
Okay.
that's another thing I would love to talk just kind of about, like another episode,
Okay.
about like identifying emotions and the way that we incorrectly identify emotions even as adults and things like that. But that's even incredible just to be able to identify it. And that's huge with kids, and I use that with kids as well.
Yes.
Also, the other thing that's not the topic that I just want to touch on really quick is the idea of kind of that faith versus therapy. You already did a great job of discussing how it doesn't have to be the case, but a lot of people do feel that way. And one thing that I want to say, it doesn't have to be this way, but you can use your faith in therapy. First of all, you can find a therapist that is of your same faith or denomination. And second, you can, which we don't have to, a lot of times we will not let you know because we should be unbiased anyway. It shouldn't really
Yeah.
matter.
And she
But
didn't, just by the way. So.
yeah, and then the other thing is, there are therapists who actually use like your faith in religion in therapy, and that's things that we can do regardless of our faith. Is learn ways to use it and learn ways that that it can be a tool. But yeah,
That's
so
awesome.
I think that's cool that you were able to step kind of beside that or kind of just see both sides, and it's not a this or that. It's not a therapy is better. It's nothing like that whatsoever. It's just I don't like it's kind of I do this in therapy all the time where my brain was like, ooh, weird metaphor, let's use that.
Uh,
But like if you're building something, you're only gonna use a screwdriver the whole time? The entire
Fair
time
point.
you only gonna use a screwdriver? Like what if there's a nail? You're just going to use the end of the screwdriver. You know what I mean? Like that would be silly. You can use multiple tools. It's okay to use multiple tools side by side. And
yeah.
a lot of times people are like, no, this is the best tool. The screwdriver is the best tool. And it's like, no, for what? Why? There can be other things and that's okay. Other things can go hand in hand. So
Oh yeah.
that's
I like that analogy.
I just come up with those in the middle of sessions. Sometimes I'm like, I'm sorry, I got to do this. But you already touched on those things. I just kind of wanted to reiterate because I think they're important. So,
Well, thank you.
yeah, absolutely. Was there so I got to ask this question, but you may or may not want to answer. A specific time, I know you're talking about kind of the things that were happening around the time when you were 22. Was it just those experiences that you already discussed that was kind of like, I just have to do this? Was there another, like kind of the culmination of things? Was it another specific experience or just ledge
I,
that you reached?
I mean, if y'all like swimming in the deep end, we can go in the deep end. So, so
Me personally, that's my favorite place, but you don't
okay.
have to. This is recorded. It's up to you.
I mean, I'm gonna keep it, PG-13, maybe slightly R a little bit, but we'll keep it, in the railings there. But again, I was 22. I grew up in a sheltered home environment. I'm not saying that in a negative way. When I talk about my childhood, I will say this: my parents, and my aunt, she's a nurse, and she's not a therapist, but I think she did some studying with psychology and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Her story is okay. But I speak to her. I didn't have a relationship with her growing up very much because of the dynamics of the adult problems.
Okay.
But now as an adult, I talk to her a lot, and it actually helps. But one thing she told me um, was ooh, my brain just left. But I'll get back on the if it comes pops to my brain, I'll tell you. But the that time frame, I know what she said. She said your parents did the best they could with what they were given.
Mm-hmm.
And I know a little bit more about their background. I did have an issue. I'll say, and I don't recommend folks doing this. I did something that may have sent me to therapy. Really, I started digging in the past of my relatives because no one was speaking, and there was obvious like flashing lights that something was wrong. And instead of me just kind of letting folks I started asking questions, and and they gave it, they talked on their own willingly, but it just became so overwhelming. It literally drove me to the idea. I went to therapy, and the first question I asked her, she said, "Why are you here?" I said, "I'm here to make sure I'm not crazy. I didn't know. I need someone to tell me that if something's wrong with me, or if I'm doing something wrong." The conclusion she came to after a few sessions was, she's like, you're not. So I can tell you right now, you're not crazy. She said, but you have a boundary issue. She said, you don't set boundaries. Yeah, yeah. It was.
That's attachment. That goes back to attachment. I love
Yeah.
that we're having that conversation. Not to cut you off. It's just
no, you're fine.
it's like as soon as you bring up parenting, as soon as we were like, oh, we have a parent, we're gonna talk about parenting. It's like, oh, this is what it's gonna be because that's what it has to come back to.
Oh yeah. Oh
Yeah.
yeah. And it all started with me digging back to my own childhood first to figure out, why do I struggle with certain things? Where did they come
Yeah.
from? But I didn't stop there, because I feel like some things you can pass on to your children. So I was like, I wonder where this came from. How did my parents get to that point? How did my grandparents get to that point? And then so much information came to me, and then it was just. I'm glad I know some things now, but for a time frame, that information was just like it was too much. Uh, but my time frame at 22, again, I grew up in a household. I wouldn't change anything about my childhood, honestly. I'm, there might be a time when I was younger where I would have said something differently, but now as an adult, I'm very thankful for the effort that my parents put forward to keep me and protect me from certain things that I didn't know I needed protection from. But at 22, coming from a situation where I hadn't done much of anything to tasting my own freedom, child or not, when I didn't have, like I said, when I didn't have my son, I was a whole other person. It was every other week for the most part, and I made at 22 up to like about 27, 28. I experienced my teenage years in that time frame. So I'm saying,
Yeah.
and I stepped on the gas pedal, and there was some things. I'm not. I always had that core belief in me. Still, my faith never left me. I always believed, but I didn't. If you'd have looked at me and how I was behaving, you would have never known from the outside looking at me. I wasn't reflecting what I believed very well. And in some cases, I would say I was a hypocrite, and I didn't care. I was going to do what I wanted to do, how I wanted to do it, when I wanted to do it, and that ended up separating me even further from my family. I kind of got to the point where I was like, look, that's their problem. I'm gonna do me. I don't want to be like around that anymore. But that caused some of things to go wrong too. Like, whenever I got too big headed and started to think that I could do it my way, it caused ripple effects in other folks' lives as well. And my dad always told me, he said, son, you have influence with your sisters, especially whether you know it or not. And what you do, they're gonna watch you do something. And if they see you do it, or if they see you give an okay to do something, careful with the thumbs, I guess. But and that even goes down to my son too. And I heard, but at the same time, that time frame, I was just like, whatever. And I there were some things I even encouraged myself. Hey, look, we're not in the house anymore. We're not in the, mom and dad aren't like our rulers. You can do whatever you want to. And for a while, I felt like I was liberating my sisters. And then when I realized that I was on the wrong path and looked back and I saw they were behaving like me, it was like, oh, no, don't, that's not the right, don't do that. But it was too late. And now I had to deal with it from a different aspect. So now that even encouraged me. I was like, you know what, it's time to make some changes. And if I do have any level of influence, it's time to use the influence for what it's meant to be used for, and not, I was at a hurt place myself trying to help people, but they say hurt people hurt people. I'm sure I played a role in that as well. But my son, man, he's a beautiful kid growing up, funny kid, very got a lot of charisma growing up. And even to this day, he's just like, I tell people all the time, my dad said the same thing about me, but he said he makes parenting relatively easy. Even when because he's not perfect. I don't expect him to be perfect. I don't think no one's going to be perfect. Uh, but he makes it relatively easy for me. Because of man, I really can't even put a finger on it right now. I'm just thankful. I'm just blessed, and I thank God for it. But he makes it easy for me. Um, and I remember sitting in the kitchen with my dad one day and looking at him. He's probably like 5 or 6. He was just playing in the kitchen. My dad looked over at me and he was like, "Man, when you were a kid," he said, "you were just different. You're special." I was like, "Cool." Most parents say about their kids. We both looked at my son. He was like, "But," he said, "but your son," he said, "he's well past where you were at that age." I didn't take that as a
Yeah.
slight at all. I knew
Mhm.
exactly what he was talking about. I looked at my dad and I was like, "I know." But what he was letting me know was you have a major responsibility
Mhm.
to manage that. Us, from father to father to child and grandson, and he was right. And it's still not that's still not done yet. I still got a ways to go, a lifetime to go.
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
yeah.
So let's take things to this aspect because it sounds like it's a lot of the past. How much of the past I would say helped you just raise your son today?
Oh man. Well, um, I would say off the top of my head, I can't. That question just kind of got my brain staticky. But if I had to take a shot at it, I would say it probably has a lot to do with it because I am a makeup of my past experiences.
Absolutely.
So there's some things that I have to remember and things I have to war with as well, not to impose on him because of something that maybe my own experience may not be his experience.
Mhm.
Mm,
But it's my job to be mindful of whatever happened in my past, and just keep an eye out for if he comes to me with questions or if I just notice things that maybe I can relate with him on. Um, but I'm taking the approach now of trying to equip him with as much as he needs for whatever he may find himself in in his
Mhm.
own time frame,
Yeah.
so that I'm not always going to be around. My
mm-hmm.
job is to make sure that he knows where to go, how to who he can talk to, um, where to gather sound information from or good advice from for wherever he's at, whenever he's at. If I'm not around, if he can't get a hold of me, if he needs to have a foundation of something he can say, well, I can go to this and I can
Mm-hmm.
find my answers here. And that's where I'm more so focusing on is making sure I uh, help equip him with what he needs and address, you don't want to expose kids to stuff too soon.
Right.
But my thing is this, whatever pops up on his own, wherever he's a kid, they're going to go out and learn stuff. If something, I hear something or catch on to something that maybe like, hey, what you know about that? Okay. I take that as okay. Now it's time to have that conversation.
Mhm.
And
Mm.
we've had plenty of those.
Absolutely.
There's, man, oh man, just for the
Tell
sake,
us.
I have no idea if my son's ever gonna see this, so I'm just gonna keep some of this stuff. But boy, it's very fun being a parent at times when you're doing it in a way that's as healthy as you can do it. And I think just the health of a relationship between you and your child is very, very important because you can't react like just react. You will do more damage reacting than just trying to take a step, breathe. If you need to take a second to yourself, I've had moments where I told my son, "Hey, look, man, I'm gonna go I'm gonna go walk for a little bit. I'm probably going about 20, maybe 30 minutes. Okay, when I get back, we're gonna have a conversation." And he goes, "Okay." And I'll go off. I've gone outside and I've said, "Hey, man, you just waiting here. Don't turn the TV on, do anything. Just do what you're responsible. I'm gonna go out and cut the grass. I'll be back." And I go cut the grass, come all the way down, have all the thoughts, maybe even make a phone call to a relative, get some outside advice, and then I then I go in the house and I have that conversation, we go from there. And I think my son has recognized that over the years because it's just been me and him, like in this house for
Mm.
the most part. Bought this house when I got this house 4 years ago. I bought it in the middle of the pandemic in 2020, almost 4 years ago. That's when I went full time. Before that, it was every other
Okay.
week. But there was some other stuff I found out that basically his grandmother was pretty much stepping in that mother role
Yeah.
to my without me fully being aware of that. So when I found out that, well, the whole point of him being with,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
mom
yeah,
for a week
absolutely.
was to be with mom. And I took the approach of, like, I don't need grandmother, raising my son for me. So I was like, hey, look, I'm not going to keep him from you. But if mom's not going to be with him, then he needs to be with dad. And that's where that's where the full-time parenting thing came on. But that even happened on like kind of like a spur of the moment type thing. Like, I'm gonna do the right thing. But after I made that decision, my whole dynamic changed too. And it's not, you don't get the whole, every other week to yourself no more. You
Mm,
know, and it's like it's full parenting, it's full-time parenting. But that helped me tremendously grow up. It was just time. He didn't ask to be here. It's my job. Either parent, really. If one parent's not where they need to be yet, it's not. Well, you don't go. Oh, you should just do this, and argue about that, blah blah. No, she has choices she can make, and so do I. But it has nothing to do with him. Somebody's got to step up, and that's what I took that as. Hey, look, we'll pray for her, but until she gets her, stuff together, I guess, it's just me and you, for the majority of the time, and that's how it's gonna be. And we'll hope the best for mom. We can't.
yeah,
We're not gonna downplay mom, and I don't participate in conversations with if it comes up. Someone said, some folks have their opinions and stuff, and I've slipped into it. Sometimes talking to folks when I catch myself, I'm like, you know what, is that's still his mom, and he needs to understand and hear that too. You can't that all kids paying attention, they're listening. And you got to be careful what you say around a child. Just like if the roles were flipped, think about it. And maybe Ronnie, you've heard some guys complain, oh man, or single dads maybe they can't get to their children because maybe mom doesn't,
yeah. Just
well
keeping
that
it sheltered.
Yeah.
well from my perspective, being the full
Yeah,
time parent, if I'm not careful, it's just I can do the same thing.
yeah.
It's not gender specific. It's a parenting flaw that can happen if you don't address some uh
The concerns
thing.
that's on the table, I guess, at the time. Yeah,
Yeah. So yeah, I would just yeah, my past has shaped everything that's for the most part of what's going on now with my son. But it's not the main thing because it's a present. I have to be present, and he has
mm,
and what's happening right now as well. The present time is just as important, if not more important, than the past. I can't undo the
mm.
past, but I have an opportunity to influence what's to come, and I
Right,
feel like
right.
that's even more important. At times.
Yeah, I want to comment on something real quick. I know
Go ahead.
that, and Courtney, I'll let you go after. I know that you mentioned stability, essentially being present, and that's my childhood. Exactly. My mother was present. I mean, countless, day in, day out. Didn't matter the circumstance, didn't matter the occasion. Like she was there. As far as my father, he was here and there, present for the most part. But again, I think present physically, but emotionally, just wasn't there. Right. So that's the part where I think missing out on. And I have a theory that I'm going to get into after Courtney says what she has to say. And I think this is going to really take the conversation to another level. Because I think at least this is just my theory and just what I believe. So if if you disagree with me, please let's hear your thoughts and your opinions on it.
Okay.
But Courtney, if you have a comment or anything, go ahead.
Okay. I gotta keep it short so we can get to this theory now and it's all the suspense. No, I was gonna kind of now I'm thinking about what you're saying. I was gonna just reiterate a couple things actually. So first of all, the thing that you had mentioned is an actual like healthy relationship tool. So taking a walk or taking time away when something comes up that you can't really handle right in that moment. That is a very specific, not therapy tool, but healthy relationship tool. I've actually used it. Just side note, we've actually used it with offenders of domestic violence because this is so hard to do because when emotions come up for us, we want to just let them out immediately. So I just wanted to kind of touch on that and how important that is. If anybody's interested in learning more about like the tool, it seems like something simple, right? It seems like something we could just grasp, like, oh, taking a walk, how difficult is that? But in the moment, it can be really difficult. And it's just called taking a break versus walking away. So if
Mm,
you're with an adult, right? If you're in an adult conversation and I say something to you that gets you emotional and you leave
hmm
without communicating anything, how am I going to feel in that moment? Are we resolving any sort of conflict? No.
exactly.
But
No,
if
they're
you can
not.
communicate, just like you said with your son, I'm gonna go take a walk. I'll be back in 20 minutes. We're gonna have a conversation about this. That's communication. You just open. Okay, I know now. I can calm down. You can calm down. We're both gonna come to this conversation with a clear head. And we're going to be able to communicate our needs a lot more effectively. So that's why it's such an important tool that I just kind of wanted to put more attention towards. And then the other thing I wanted to say was, you kind of answered Ronnie's question before Ronnie asked it a little bit, just in saying that when you said, and we don't have to go into this too much, but doing the digging about your history and about your parents' history and things like that. Now, I'm not, it's going to be different family to family, but what I was going to say was I would recommend to a certain point doing that. And the reason that I would recommend it for people is, like I said, to a certain point. Don't go crazy, and absolutely have support, like you said, right? Because that's the time that it got really heavy. But I think having the ability, having that statement that you said earlier, your parents did what they could, like with what they had. Did what they could. Did I say that right?
The
Anyway,
best they could with what they had. Yeah.
the best they could with what they had. But I think that's so important. And with having the knowledge of the resources that they had, so I know a little bit. Of course, we weren't there, right? But I have a good relationship with my mom's parents, so I can kind of see a little bit of how they grew up. But I can also see some of the things with, like, okay, my grandparents are not super great on this side, not just different things and how she may have grown up. And then I see a lot of what my dad experienced as a kid and what he had. So I can look and see, that's the reason I'm not getting this. That's the reason this is not trickling down to me. It's not because I'm not loved. It's not because I'm not heard. It's not because my parents don't care about me. Where would they have gotten that skill from? And of course, like I said, I give validation and I give understanding, but I also don't want to give excuses, right?
Yeah.
Because now we're all adults and now they can seek out those skills. But it's kind of like, how do they know to seek those skills out? So the reason that I'm saying this is because I think as an adult, it can really help us to validate ourselves as well. And I think what I've seen with parents, like in my work and things like that, is that like pendulum swing, where it's like, my dad didn't put, I'm just making an example, my dad wasn't able to put food on the table, or he wasn't present, so we all had to work for ourselves. So I'm gonna work 80 hours a week to make sure my family has money and food.
Yeah,
but then my kids never see me because I'm at work for 80 hours a week. And it's like, you're not listening to your children and what they need. You're just like, I'm taking this piece of information from my childhood and swinging it all the way over here because I don't want my kids to experience what I experienced.
Exactly.
And it's like, but now they're experiencing something completely different that now they need to move forward and heal from themselves. Because you didn't create any balance and seek what was needed in your family. And they're, like we said, they're doing the best that they can because that's the information that they have. But at the same time, that's why I think those conversations with a 10-year-old, with an 8-year-old, with a 5-year-old, right? They're so smart. And hearing what they need is going to be the answers that it's like, we need all these answers and we don't know what to do. And it's like, your answers are right there. They're little, right? And they might not know exactly where we're coming from, but a lot of the answers are right there. And just kind of trying, again, I'm not giving parenting advice whatsoever. I just think that perspective is, people don't always like the history taking, right? And it's hard to dig into that. It's hard to, a lot of it comes from like me having to be like, oh, my dad has trauma. Let's think about my dad's trauma. Where does that, like, what did that really mean and how did that shape him? And it helped me understand myself so much. And like you said, those boundaries. Why do I have boundary issues? And I'm like, back. And now I can understand a little bit more. So
Courtney,
it's not to torture yourself.
I want to kind of jump in here real quick and just ask, why not just ask your parent?
They don't. So in my situation,
well, no, just in general, not in your situation. I guess. Go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say in my situation, and this is, again, we're not talking negatively about our families here, but in my situation, they may not have the information, but they definitely don't have the language. Me and my sister do a very good job, and I think we very briefly and carefully touched on this in the family dynamics episode. They don't quite have the language to discuss these things. If I said, Dad, let's talk about your trauma, my dad would say, what trauma?
I guess
he doesn't
lack
identify
of
it. Exactly. And I'm fortunate enough to have the education to understand, like, this really truly impacted you. We see it every day, how it impacts you. And we try to help, but they see it
That's
very
fair.
differently. So I, as an adult, cannot ask my parents those questions. Some questions, right? Like, how did it feel when this happened? Or how did you manage when this happened? Right? Things like
Yeah.
that. But they don't always have the language. And especially at my job, right? These kids are so smart. And I work 12 to 18, with ages 12 to 18. So they're so smart and have so much information. And I can't ask them to seek the information from their parents because I can see that they don't have it. If they had the information, the kids would have more communication, they'd have more connection to the parents. But they don't. And that's where I come in.
So then you're saying you have to go beyond your parents, but for someone like myself, I grew up with my father's mother only. So there, where are my answers really going to come from besides my aunts and uncles?
Oopsie. Sorry.
So it's like we can go so far.
Well, and it doesn't, I don't think it necessarily has to be like, I guess I was fortunate enough to have a little bit of a story of where
Yeah.
my parents came from. But I think it's also just kind of for me, every family dynamic, again, I'm aware that I'm fortunate to have two parents still. And someone just asked me the other day, like the way they phrased it, they said, "Where do your parents live?" And I said, "In Arizona." And they were like, "Oh, they're married?" Like just the way they phrased it, I was like, yes, I realize how fortunate I am that yes, they are. Like I get that.
That's not funny,
And
but I'm sorry.
no,
That's
no,
so sad. Oh my,
it's true, but it's true, and it's
yeah, it's
just
true.
the way that they phrased it was so funny, and I was like, I wasn't offended whatsoever. I was like, yeah, I'm aware of what
That's
things
the
look like. I
reality.
teach healthy relationships, like I'm not numb to this, but yeah, so but what I was going to say was just kind of as adults, I don't expect kids to do this whatsoever. It's difficult work, but kind of just observing your parents and
Yeah.
seeing, I can see in one conversation with them what they are capable of and incapable of. And
Mm.
I've pushed some more difficult conversations and then I'm like, see, that didn't go. I can't do that. Like this type of information is not going to work because I've tried this type of information and it's not quite there.
Yeah.
I can, we can try and we can try different avenues, but we see how it goes. And yeah,
Ronnie,
he's
please don't
he's
forget.
been,
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
no, go ahead. I was gonna say you've been waiting.
No, Ronnie, please don't forget your
We're
that
going
juicy
back to
Oh
the
no,
steak
theory.
question.
that theory is
Uh,
right here, man. I can't
okay.
wait to say it. Trust
Okay.
me.
I have really bad, oh, not really bad, but I have ADHD type symptoms sometimes, so my brain can like forget stuff like this. So I wrote some stuff down, but
No.
real quick, uh, man, I just did it just now. I, whatever you just said, Courtney.
Uh-huh.
Oh man,
Was it about her
Having
parents being
having
married?
oh,
difficult, you can't
oh.
always, yeah.
So so I had to come to the conclusion, and again, back to like I go to my faith a lot for things, right? I had a question for God, and I was like, hold up, like, why is it that I have to be the bigger person all the time with my parents? Why? They're the adult. Or I'm an adult now too, but they've been here longer. They should get it. Blah blah. And while I was asking these questions, it just hit me. I gave you the ability, Patrick,
Exactly.
to let things go. I gave you the ability to forgive.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they haven't gotten there yet. But
Mm-hmm.
since I gave it to you, guess what that means? Since you know better now,
You
Patrick,
gotta
it
use
means
it.
you may have to display it to them first.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
And that
Mm-hmm.
may be the thing that helps shift them into that understanding, the mercy and the grace from their own child. And I was like, oh my goodness. So
Absolutely. Yeah.
my mom and I relationship, and she's my big now, my boss, right? Or I don't say boss, she's broker in charge, but uh the the dynamic, there was a feeling of almost something evil that was trying to come between me and my mom's relationship from my childhood, from a child up. When I was a baby, like elementary school age, yeah, she was mother, but then something shifted, okay, where it was like me and my mom were at war all the time, okay,
Ah, okay.
and then another reason why I wasn't so interested in the real estate stuff at first because I was like, I have a new stepfather now, I got a new stepmother now, my stepdad is working with my mom, they're in their office doing stuff, and I'm just avoiding everybody.
Yeah.
But the thing was, it came to me one day when I saw my sisters kind of going off the deep end a little bit sometimes in some areas, um, where they were just acting like brother. So it's not, I'm not, um, I realized that one, especially from a son's perspective, it's very important for me to get that relationship mended with my mother, especially if I ever want to have a wife one day. Okay. So I took it upon myself. My mom, comes from a time frame where it's not so easy for her and my dad as well to open up and say, you know what, it's my fault. I'm sorry. I apologize.
Yep, exactly.
I didn't grow up when they grew up. Things were different when they were.
Yeah.
But again, I had the ability to. So I called my mom one day and said, hey, we're going to have a conversation right now. It's probably going to be uncomfortable. But I got some questions and I got, some things, and I got some things I want to apologize to you about. I didn't even expect her to apologize to me. Some people call their parents with the expectation, why can't you say sorry? Why can't you this and that? I just wanted to say sorry for my part and apologize to her. And whatever came after that was just icing on the cake. And the conversation again ended with tears. And the relation,
you like crying, huh?
Well, man, if you only knew, if I could, man, I wish I had more time to explain to you guys. I'm so open about that now. No, Ronnie, what you just said, I'm glad you brought that up. The answer to that is yes. I cry a lot. I am not afraid to say it. Brene Brown, thank you. It's not always a bad cry. This year I made it, towards the end of last year, I actually dove further into my faith than I've ever done for my life. I've called myself a believer since I was 8 years old, right? But that just because I believed didn't mean that I was doing what I needed to be, doing on my end. It wasn't until I went through some things that I realized how much help I really needed. And now I dropped my pride, especially as a man. Me and he's crying this and that. No. They called my dad Blues growing up because he cried so much. Okay, and then I inherited, yeah, and I inherited, and I know more about his story now. And his story was his it's rough. Whenever I complain about my childhood, I ask God to forgive me because now that I know what my parents and my aunts and my uncles and grandparents experienced and how they survived it, I'm like I ought not have been as complained as much as I did, but I cry often now, but not always in a bad way thing. I wake up in the morning and before I give time to my phone, before I go brush my teeth or anything like that, I get up out the bed. And I do something that I thought was always it's kind of lame. I get on my knees and I pray first thing in the morning. And in that prayer, I don't try to construct some beautiful, well worded sound. No. I just get up and I just talk to God like I'm talking to my father. And I tell him everything I did wrong, and that recently everything I feel like I'm guilty of. And I don't just say in general. I specifically call out whatever it was, dirty, nasty, inappropriate, whatever it may be. I'll say it. Because it needs to be verbalized so I can hear and understand, where I'm at. And in those conversations and praying for other people and praying for myself, that's when I started experiencing the tears and the emotions regularly. And what happens is when I go about my day and I face challenges with folks I might get angry with, cause I used to be a hothead too, by the way. Someone told me, you're so calm one day. And I was just like, this is all new. If you'd have met me 2 years ago, you'd have probably not liked me. But I get all of it out in private with God. Then I go in my day when something gets riled up in me, it's easy to go, you know what? Those emotions are already let out. So they won't come out on somebody else now.
Yeah.
And I can kind of size it. And if I do feel like that, I do what I think myself, you know what? I know I'm going to be, when I go to bed and when I wake up in the morning, I'm going to talk to God. I'll deal with what I'm feeling right now then or throughout the day, randomly if I need to. And I'll let it out in that way. So when people say, oh, you're so this and that, I'm like, it really ain't me. But thank you. But the other thing I wanted to touch on, like I already mentioned, if I had the ability to let things go, then I have that responsibility to do it first, and then watch what happens. Sometimes when you do that, sometimes the answer to what you're asking for, it starts with something that you're saying that you won't do.
Yeah.
When you say, I'm not gonna be the one to do this, I ain't gonna do this. Well, that's why you're never gonna break through that situation because it's the pride attached to it. Your pride is blocking you from getting to where you're trying to go. So, and that's applying that to myself.
Interesting.
And already brought this up. Yeah, I was just kind of a hothead, so
Yeah.
now I'm learning how that walk we talked about, all those things had to be incorporated to get to me a place where I am obsessed with peace nowadays. When I got this home, I remember I was living kind of crazy up until I got this house. Really, when I had my free time, I was clubbing, partying, drinking, whatever you could think of. I was trying a little bit of everything. And I promised God, I said, you know what, if you get my son out of this rental cycle, if you get me out of this cage I feel like I'm in, if you get me a home, I'll change my life. And you got to be careful what you say, right? because you
Really
know,
good.
So when I got this house, I remember what I said. When I got the home, I still wasn't perfect. I still struggled. But I got this house. The first night I slept in this house, it was so quiet. I woke up in the middle of the night, panicked, like this,
Yeah.
because it was so quiet. I thought I had died. And I was like, it was just too peaceful. And then I'm not even kidding. I remember walking through my house just thanking God, and then again crying. 'Cause I remember a time frame where I was wishing to be standing where I was standing, and now I'm standing there. And it also came to my mind was, okay, do you remember what you said you were going to do
Mm.
when you got there? And I was like, well, it's game on now. It's time to start, putting the metal to the pedal. That's Sorry I get so excited when I talk about this, man.
Yeah.
But it's
No,
just,
that's awesome.
it's
That's
just,
Uh-huh.
man,
awesome.
it's so
Mhm.
much that's happened in the last decade, but last 5 years especially, and there's still more work to be done. And I'm just excited about what's next, and how it may help other people as well too.
Hmm.
That's why I was excited to come on here and talk with you all today.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, that's it. That's all I want to share.
Yeah. I just wanted to say, Ronnie, we've had this conversation and I already heard it back. This is exactly the coffee metaphor that we've previously used,
Mm.
where we were talking about what are you full of? So we were having a conversation about and it's recorded, episode 78, I think
78. No, it was most
77.
recent.
I mean,
Wasn't it
sorry, 98, 90,
like 98? Yeah,
98. I don't know why
should
I
be
went 70.
98.
98, 97.
I'll
That's
write
where
that down.
the 7 came in. Coffee analogy is whatever you are full of is what's going to spill out of you. And
Oh,
yes, and so whatever the only way to make sure that you're not full of frustration, full of anger, so that's what's flowing out of you, is to do that work. And to, if there is anger within you, we don't always have control of that, right? But how can you process it on your own? Like you said, taking your own time to make sure you're processing that. So now you are full of peace. Now, when you're releasing that anger, you're filling up with peace, you're filling up with gratitude, right? You're taking that time to whatever it is, and you leave feeling more at peace, feeling more comfortable. And then now when you go out into the world, you're full of comfort, you're full of gratitude, you're full of peace. So when something rattles you, that's what comes out of you, right? Where if you left in the morning, you're like, ugh, I hate this, I'm just gonna do the
Mm.
same thing every day. Now I'm
oh,
going out
whew.
into the world with that energy, and whatever hits me, that's the energy I give out. So
Yep.
that's what you're doing in the morning. And whether it's, I think religion is a fantastic way to release that, but it doesn't have to be the only way. I mean, people can do that and talk to themselves.
Oh
People
yeah.
can journal. Like those same conversations can be within themselves, can be in a journal. It can be, I talk to my dog and have those conversations, right? I'm just like, what am I doing here? What are we supposed to do? Right? My voice might be a little bit different, but those conversations, it doesn't matter how they're had, they're still so important. Um, so I wanted to just refer back to the coffee thing, but I also just wanted to say, and I think I say this all the time, where it's like, this is not the direction I thought the episode was going to go, but it's so important. And I don't think, I think part of the reason that people do tend to struggle with parenting, and again, I'm not a parent, so I sound ridiculous, I think, even saying this, but is because they just don't they look at just the kids, right? And just the
Hmm.
current situation. And it's like, but you are the parent and what you are doing, and are you healed? And and I don't think healing continues. I don't think it ever ends. So I don't know
Yes,
if
that's right.
healed really is a thing, but are you working on you? And that's what's going to be important. And so I'm glad we're taking the episode back a little bit. I'm glad we're talking about the present. I'm glad it's not all about your son, because that is so so important, rather than just being like, oh, kids do this and we do that, and kids do this and we do that. um so yeah, I think that's important, just the introspection as
Yeah.
well. So
Well said.
it's cool.
Yeah, no, definitely. So let's go ahead and get into this theory that I have.
let's
So this
Oh
is
let's
gosh.
hear
based
it.
off
Let's hear
of
it. We've waited
this is
long
based off of
enough.
how I was raised and kind of what happened in my household. And I make the comparison, not to compare, trying to make apples to apples comparison, but
Okay.
more or less looking at the situation for what it was. So I was a very troublesome child, for those that know. And I gave my mom a run for her money. And I think, honestly, if my father wasn't present, I would have gave her even more running for money. I
Oh,
would have
okay.
put her in immense amounts of debt. Like it would have been bad. But because there was a father present, of course, I knew, all right, there's a male figure that I still have to deal with. I can't just overrule this, this woman here. Right. So this is when I started to think about it. I was like, well, most households that don't have a male figure, those are typically the boys who do whatever the hell they want, honestly. So and this really works for those individuals that are co-parenting. And I'm not trying to, again, I don't have kids. Courtney and I, we don't deal with that on a regular basis. So if you do and you want to challenge this theory, by all means, please do. Try it. See if it works. If it doesn't, don't do it. I don't really, it's your household. Do what you want. But I ultimately say all this to say is when you have a boy, and this is going to work really for those who are co-parenting more than anything. Whereas if you're already in, if both genders are already in the household, then it's going to work just fine. But if you're raising a boy, I think there always needs to be a male figure in that household. Maybe it doesn't have to be raising the child, but at least a male figure, and vice versa. If you're raising a girl, a woman's figure has to be in that household. And I say all this because it comes off of, it's the thing. It's like when you're looking at a boy, and Courtney's laughing because she's like, you're genderizing, but no, this is a real thing. Because
I got a good response to this. I'm just waiting.
please do, because, and this is how I look at it. I'm going back to what I have experienced. Right? I thought about the things that I was doing, knowing I was gonna get in trouble, but I also thought about, all right, well, now I got to deal with my dad at the same time. It wasn't so much of what I'm putting mom through. It was, all right, I got to deal with dad, right? I got to deal with that male figure in there. So that's why I say this is my theory. I would say I would love for everybody to have a male figure. Have both genders, do whatever it is that you desire, but a male figure when you're raising a boy, I think is important, and vice versa. But I'm curious to hear what you guys have to say on that theory. Go ahead.
Courtney, you want to go ahead?
No, you're the guest. You can go.
Oh, okay.
Let's see
Well,
what you have to say, Patrick.
so I mean, just to make sure I heard you correctly, you're saying that the father figure is more, has more of
impact on the boy. Yeah.
a boy, and then a mother has a more impact on a girl.
Yeah.
I'm gonna say this,
Let's hear it.
and then my situation is probably gonna be the response is probably gonna be like,
I think we need to go for a walk first and then come back.
Yeah.
And then... Just kidding.
That was a good one. That was good. I hear what you're saying, Rodney, but I'm going to have to respectfully disagree. And I'm gonna say this. I think a balance of both is going to be important for both. Either depending on the gender, doesn't matter. Gender is irrelevant.
Mm-hmm.
If father is missing, you're going to have. I've heard folks, mainly on the internet, who have said that a single father may come out with more things that you need or you need to be equipped with than you would with a single mother. But I don't think that necessarily negates or adds, or I don't think that takes away from the importance of both people being present. But I'll say that because there's things that I even notice. I tell my son sometimes, and I tell people to ask, I'm not a mom, and I can never replace mom. There's some things that a woman can do that a man just can't, and there's some things that a man can do that a woman just cannot. And I know that's a touchy subject with some such areas, but I mean that with all respect. And I say you cannot replace a woman's.
I agree.
There's times where I've had, and I have. This is why it's important. I keep the aunts and the grandmothers and the great aunts all involved a little bit with my parenting because there's no woman in the home. Okay, so I even need them to kind of like tell me sometimes, hey, you're not wrong, but you need to be a little, or he needs somebody he can go to that can give him that woman's perspective. I don't ever get between that, because there's some things that even a little boy needs to experience that comfort, that reassurance, that nurturing is what it is. Nurturing is the perfect word. And can a father nurture in a sense? Yeah, but it's not going to be the same as it would with mama, and he's going to tell you or not. When the young lady's father is not present, right, or she's raised by mom, I mean, there's some things that she's going to struggle with, and if she tells you or not, she's going to internalize. All right, take mother away from her. Same thing.
So that's the thing. I think, and I probably what I'm saying is the wrong way, because I'm not saying mother or father should be MIA. Like I'm
Oh
not
yeah.
saying I'm not saying that entirely. I just think there should be more of a majority. Like it could be a 50-50 thing if that's what works for you guys. Great, but I think let's just say if it's co-parenting, let's just say like a 60-30 scenario where 60 of that percent of the time is spent more with the boy, whereas and vice versa, right? Where 60% is spent more of the time, 30% is you still get that. It may not be a true 50-50 balance aspect of it, but it's a little more of that time, right? Because it's honestly,
Oh, 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 oh,
I'm gonna
I think
say
I know what you're
this.
saying.
There was no woman that could teach me how to pee. I'm just being honest. Like that's just reality of it. I'm sorry, but there's and I can't teach a woman how to pee. There's it's those sort of the little things that I think of that not on a regular basis, but it's just top of mind that makes me
Okay.
say I think that's why majority, just majority. I'm
Mhm.
not saying all, and I think that's where we may have had that disconnect there.
Okay. I'm glad you stopped and didn't have to suffer through that. Okay, so my response, yeah. So Ronnie basically said what my response was going to be, but um, what I was saying was I'm not like ignorant to understanding that men and women can be different, male and female can be different, right? So I'm not going to sit here and say no, there's no differences across the board. But what I'm basically the bottom line of what I'm trying to say is it doesn't have to be that way moving forward. Right. So we talked a lot about how generations and our parents' generation, our grandparents' generations have been different, right? We've evolved, things have changed. And I understand these are my opinions, and I'm fully aware that there are other people think very, very differently about this, but it does not have to be that way. Men, and I understand what you're talking about the nurture. I think a lot of we talk about like a woman's intuition and different things like that. Like there are things that I understand, like, I don't know, for me versus male friends, like are definitely going to come a lot easier to me, which feels like naturally, but it does not mean it's not something you can learn and something you can grow into and something you can have. And I think every time everything that I've been talking about thus far and with my clients and me personally is just about that connection, that emotional connection to father. And I think that's a lot of what it comes down to is like, oh, if there's emotions or like those tough conversations, we go to mom. And if it's like tools and money and like difficult, like the punisher and the one who sets the boundaries, like that's dad. And it's like,
That was my
what?
mama.
Like so
That
exactly,
was my
yeah.
mom
So
too, though.
and
That's
I
what I'm saying.
also
Like,
another thing I think is really interesting is I think that's also cultural, which is just an interesting conversation to
Yeah,
have. But
yeah.
but you know what I mean? Like we create these rules and it's like, no, like there's gonna be women who are really good at those things and men who are a little bit more softer or want to have that connection or want to
I
like
agree.
so one thing just really quick, like I know in my childhood I would get that my dad would be the one that's like, go to your room. And I'm like, for what? Like, what happened? He's like, because I said so. And then I'd be sitting in my room for like 5, 10, whatever. And then my mom would come in and be like, do you know why you're in here? And that's where that connection would come in. So she wouldn't negate the punishment, right? She wouldn't be like, okay, come out, but she'd at least talk to me through it. And that meant a
Yeah.
lot to me because I would be like, okay, like I'm not just sitting, I didn't learn anything if I'm just sitting here. Like I don't even know what happened or like what frustrated my father in that moment. So, or maybe I did, but whatever. So, but that's where that connection came in. Men are fully capable of having those conversations.
Absolutely.
Don't, so we're not here to say like, oh, men can't do that, right?
Absolutely.
And again, I understand there are things that are, like we said, maybe naturally not as easy to come up with, but that's the kind of the point that I'm making with a lot of these parenting things and adult things is we are able to make those decisions. And we as adults choose, I want to have a more emotional connection to my sister, son, child, parent, grandparent, right? Whatever it is. Or I want to try to be more nurturing. I want to try to be more emotional. I want to try, those different things. Or I know I need to have better boundaries with myself so then I can set harder boundaries for with friends. And then maybe when I have kids, then those kids will learn those hard boundaries, right? I experience parenting with my dog and I know that my boundaries are not good with my dog, right? It's completely different, but it's important because if it was a kid and I go back on my boundaries, that could like their safety could be different because they don't really listen to me and I let it go. Right? That's what happens with my dog, but that could be a safety issue if it was a child, right? So just different things like that. Like I don't want a man in the house. And this has actually happened with my dog. It's funny, this is a good example where I'm like, he's fine, it's not a big deal. But then whatever guy is interacting with him, he's like, no, you do this. I don't want a husband so that they can do that. Like, I'm not, I don't want the dad to be there. Oh, this is your job with the kid.
Oh, I got you.
I want to
Got you.
have these skills, right? I want both of us to be able to have these skills. If I'm not home, the kid gets to do whatever they want because dad's not home. That's like,
Yeah.
and I've heard that before where it's like, wait till your father gets home and then this happens. It's like, you both want to be able to build those skills. Do they both come naturally to both of you? Maybe not, but we are limiting ourselves if we say, I can't have these skills, or, oh, I'm not this in the house, I'm not that in the house because I'm the woman, I'm the female.
Yeah, I agree.
That's all.
I agree.
That's my perspective.
I guess like what you, or I want to expound on what you just said. It doesn't come naturally at some things to me, but there's some things that I've had to learn how to do because it's just me and him. I don't want to start. Well, if I start naming stuff, I don't want to sound like misogynistic, like name. But there's things that people tend to think that would be a
Yeah.
woman's role. But my thing is,
Yes.
if no one does it in here, then it just won't get done. So
Yeah.
I have to do them, and some of the things I enjoy doing sometimes, and I have to be attentive as well. I can tell when my son is being pushed too far. I can tell when I'm being too tough on him. Uh, I don't know if I told y'all this, but I've coached him and his basketball teams twice. I didn't get to play too many sports growing up, and that's one thing I resented. And I use that word in its full, meaning. Resented that I didn't get to, show my parents how good I was at sports at times. They were busy, so I've taken and got to go actually coach my son, and that was just amazing. And so the dynamic now after doing that for 2 seasons, even at the home, it's like it's a different dynamic between father and son now because the coaching doesn't really stop. In some ways, I incorporate that into the parenting. There's some things where it's just kind of like, look, man, don't cross this boundary.
Absolutely.
It's like I'm gonna get to you ahead of time. Some things you just is but for the most part, I can talk to my son and explain to him, okay, this is why this can't happen, and I make sure he understands. Do you understand what I'm saying? If he has questions, ask me. Let's talk about it. There's times where he needs a hug. There's time when man, let me tell you, I'm like you said, you never stop healing, and you never stop learning. If you think you've finished with one of the two of those things, then you are going to tear some stuff up in life. And I'm probably, I'm pretty conscious of that. But one thing I started doing recently is like from time to time, I just hug my son. Just hug him. Like I give him a long hug. And the first 3 seconds is kind of like this. You hold on longer than 3 seconds. This is what you feel after about 3 seconds. It gets even tighter from him.
Yeah.
On his own. No words.
Mm-hmm.
I don't need to know what that means. And he'll go just like this. At 11 years old. You know how many parents at 11 years old couldn't even, they try to hug or touch their kids. Mom, what are you doing? Daddy, top.
Yeah.
Okay? I take stuff like that as a measuring stick of kind of like where I'm at with my parenting. Because he doesn't have to do that. He wants to do that. Which lets me know he might need that. And and that, man, I'm telling you, there's some major pros. I know we live in a time frame where folks are just kind of like, I want to have only this amount of kids, and I don't want any kids at all. But that's their choice. But I do think if someone gave it a shot, and experience, and of course, you have to do your part as a parent. This doesn't happen naturally. You got to parent right for this to happen. But if the reward from doing it correctly or the best of your ability is stuff like that, it's priceless. You can't put a price tag on it. You cannot. There's times where I think like, man, it'd be nice to have a wife, or dating maybe it's a whole other episode. We're talking about dating as a single parent, but yeah, there's times, and I have a dog now too. That's another topic for the time. How I got her is interesting, and how I give you a small snippet on that. I have a fire pit out back. My neighbors come over, they hang out with me sometimes, and they noticed that when I first moved here, I was going through some tough stuff. Like I was not even trying to hide it. I'd be out. I'd be out in my front yard at 1 o'clock in the morning with my headlights on the front of the house, digging up my garden and putting plants. No, I don't want that there. No, I want it here. No, I want that there. Like seriously, yeah, it was a lot going on, but I couldn't go to sleep. And he told me one day, he said, "You need a dog, man." He said, "You need a dog." And I was like, "Ah, man, I don't need any more responsibilities. I already got a kid, man." I said, "But their dog is pretty cool." And I was like, "You know what? If I found a dog with the same temperament as yours, but they have a little small like Shih Tzu, I wanted something a little bit bigger, something like actually, maybe somebody come to my house, do some defending." And I described the dog to the T at that fire pit, okay, around the fire. And I said, "That's the kind of dog I need." I kid you not. Maybe a month later, uh, actually, I was sitting outside on the fire pit again, with another friend of mine, down there drinking, and it was dark, and I seen the silhouette of a dog between the houses, the alleyway behind me, and it was growling at me like, "Roar," and all I could see was a silhouette, and I'm thinking, all right,
Not
come
today.
over, come over here tripping, you know what I'm saying, like, and but I didn't realize that dog was going to be my dog in about 2 weeks, right? So oh my goodness.
Happy birthday.
Congratulations.
Yeah,
You got a
yeah.
dog.
Congratulations.
But I saw the dog roaming through my yard during the daytime. I was in the kitchen, so I looked out the window. It was like a pit mix, right? And I was like, I don't know.
Mm.
So I opened the door and I kind of whistled like, "Come here." And she came over, wagging her tail. And she came up to my steps, and she just kind of like instantly, kind of like just like wanted some attention. I
Mhm.
was like, "Who let this nice dog, roam the neighborhood like this?" I found the owners. They gave her to me, and
Oh,
exactly the temperament the dog I explained. She's already trained, potty trained,
Mhm.
sit, lay down, all that stuff. She know how to do all that stuff.
Mhm.
Uh, Very loving, very affectionate, and it's a lady dog. I call her lady.
Mhm.
I never had a lady dog, a female dog before.
Mhm.
And they're much different than the guy dogs. Okay,
Mhm.
but that's what I needed. She is affectionate. She will like want to snuggle up with you, and it's like it bought me some. It eased that time frame of wanting a woman around. I still want one, but it filled that space a little bit, and it was exactly what I needed right when I needed it. But yeah, um, yeah. So, but same thing with my son. There's times I'm thinking, sitting around the house, I'm having adult thoughts in my head. I'm kind of like, man, it's winter time. It's cold. You know what I'm saying? I could save on some
That's
electricity bill
funny.
if I had somebody snuggle up next to me. Uh, but then I have that thought comes to my head. A correcting thought comes to my head is, yeah, but you
Mhm.
have a son you can spend some time with. Y'all can sit on the
Mhm.
couch and watch movies together. Y'all can
yeah.
y'all can technically not, in an appropriate man, of course, snuggle up. That's my son.
Mhm.
Watch movies, and you can keep him warm, so he can
Mhm.
experience that warmth of his parent watching a movie, his favorite movie.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I was like, you know what? That's right. Instead of complaining about what I don't have, be mindful of what's already present in front of me, and handle it correctly. So when I do receive what I want, I'll already be in the mindset of knowing how to care for it because I didn't start that process when I got what I wanted. I started it before I got it.
Mhm.
Mm.
Wow. Yeah. I already.
So,
Don't worry. I marked this time for our
yeah.
quotes. Our quote posts. I marked the time down.
So,
Yeah.
there's not much more that I need to say after that one.
Mhm.
Patrick, if you don't mind just sharing your socials, or how can people connect with you if they're curious or want to hear more of like your story, your perspective on things?
Yes, social media. If you can look me up on Instagram, it's Dunn Deal Realtor. Dunn DUNN underscore deal underscore realtor. My Facebook will reflect that same handle soon. Actually, today is the day I can change it. I was gonna change it to that today, so I had to wait 20 some days before I could do it. But that'll be the same handle. I have Twitter as well. I believe it's the same handle. If not, you'll find those listed on my Facebook. So yeah.
Yeah, and I'll do my best to leave it in the description below as well. But now you guys know he left this information for you guys to reach out. So until next time, keep on applying this perspective, education, growth, and collaboration.
Thank you.